What's up, guys? Another edition of the Kody and Nick podcast here, post Memorial Day weekend. How was your weekend, buddy?
Pretty good, man. Spent it down at Lake of the Ozarks. Got some
Oh,
time
yeah.
out on the water. Good weekend. How was yours?
It was all right. I didn't quite get down to the Ozarks, but hit up a barbecue on Sunday. So I got my grilling in and, did a little yard work as well. A little productive weekend. Real
For
solid.
sure.
So,
Thanks to everyone who serves and has served for
of course. Yes,
everything that you
absolutely.
do.
100%. All right, so we got a lot to get to here. I want to move into the football real quick here. We're doing an NFC North breakdown today. We're going to start with the Packers. They won the division last year, obviously, and then lost in the first round of the playoffs to the 49ers. Famously lost Devontae Adams this offseason. I just don't know. I think you kind of feel the same way as me, but the Packers just seem like they're taking a slight step back. Still have Rodgers on the team, so they'll be good. They'll win 10 or 11 games, but I just don't see a lot of upside here from this team as a whole.
Yeah, I don't see them. I would take them out of a Super Bowl bubble if I had to put, let's say, like 6 or 7 teams in there. They are in the easier NFC, which is going to help them out. But I
Yeah,
mean, these last 2 years were the 2 years to get another ring for Rodgers, and I don't see his chances getting better this year. So, we'll get into like best bets later, but I could see the Vikings winning the division, and then if Rodgers has to go on the road, I don't know how I feel about him winning another playoff game. So.
yeah, he's just been consistently a notch lower than his normal self in the playoffs. So, if he elevates and the defense turns itself into a top 5 unit, maybe this team can get back to the 13 wins they were at last year. But they're going to need the defense to take a big step forward here. They got a young secondary that I like, but yeah, it's hard to see how the offense gets better without Adams and no major additions other than that. The trade
Yep.
long run might be good for them, but short run, it's going to hurt.
Going defense with those 2 picks in the first round also kind of signals that they're kind of prepping for a post Rodgers era. So I don't know if he's going to be there for the full length of that extension that he signed. So
yeah, it's hard to trust. He just seems like kind of a loose cannon in general. If he retired next offseason, would you be surprised? I
nope.
wouldn't. I could see
Wouldn't
him.
be surprised if they after the offseason, if he doesn't feel like the team's good enough, that he just randomly retires. So
Yeah, I think the Packers probably have the same thing in mind. So maybe they're just thinking a little more long term here. But I don't know. I feel like you got to take your shots when you got your quarterback.
yep.
Although it did sound like Adams is the one that chose to leave. So I don't know what you're going to do about that. Let's move into the fantasy side here. So with Adams leaving, obviously a lot of vacated targets and really a kind of a question at the number 1 receiver here, drafting Christian Watson in the second round. Lazard's still there, Tunyon at tight end, Jones in the backfield. Maybe they just go committee approach, but we both like Lazard's value. He's at 126th overall on the site that I use. It's called NFC ADP. It's just an amalgamation of some high stakes leagues. So
Gotcha.
we really like that value. 126. That's going to be like round 11 in a 12-team league. Later than that in a 10-team league.
Yep.
Potentially getting the number 1 target here. You got to like it.
Yeah, absolutely. Him and Christian Watson. I would be fine with drafting either of them because Watson on ESPN, Watson was going 1 round later. So if you happen to miss out on Lazard, I wouldn't mind taking Watson and, just hoping that he becomes the wide receiver 1 there in Green Bay. But yeah, either one that you can get your hands on. I even we'll kind of go through the tight ends in this division. None of them are really good. But Tanyan at the very end, someone's going to have to catch all these targets from Aaron Rodgers. So as long as Aaron Rodgers is the quarterback, and if you get your hand on Lazard, Watson, or Tanyan at where they're getting drafted currently, that's a steal. That's someone that could quickly turn into your wide receiver, 1 or 2 on your team, and you got them, round 10 or later. So either one I'd be happy with there.
Yeah, I think the ambiguity is what's driving down their value right now. It's hard to tell where the number 1 option is going to be, or if it's just going to be a committee approach. But Rodgers likes to hyper target his number 1, and maybe he ends up just spreading the love here. But he's going to throw 30 touchdowns. Even that's a step down for him. But they got to go somewhere. So.
Yep.
I think it's easily see Lazard catching 10 touchdowns, and maybe his upside isn't quite what someone around him. We have some guys that are being drafted around him here, like a Rondale Moore, Michael Gallup might have slightly more upside just because they could end up being, they just have a little more draft pedigree, a little more upside as a player. But I just really like Lazard's position. I mean, if he's the one there, it's going to be hard for him to fall below like wide receiver 3 value.
Yeah, I mean, in this year, Alan Lazard I would have over Rondale Moore, Tyler Boyd, and
I
Michael
would.
Gallup pretty easily. I mean, all of those guys are easily the second or third option on their team. And, Michael Gallup is coming off of an injury. So, I mean, I would love to take Alan Lazard over any of those guys. And then Christian Watson, I mean, even the guys he's getting drafted around later, I'd gladly take him there as well. I mean, he's the bigger question mark just because you have no idea what he could be. With Lazard, you kind of know what you get. I mean, even with Devontae Adams there, I always felt like Lazard was really their number 2 receiver. MVS just never seemed to get the targets kind of where when he needed them
Got his
from
specific
Rodgers.
role.
Yeah. So I love Lazard. And, if you're someone who would rather take the shot on the rookie, especially that late in the draft, then Christian Watson is probably going to be your guy.
Yeah, we like both their value. Watson has a little higher ceiling, but a lower floor at the same time. So I think we both kind of agree there. We can move on to Rodgers himself. I mean, there's not too much to say here. I mean, he has, his floor just because he's really good at what he does, and he's going to throw a decent amount of touchdowns. But I think they might hand the reins over to the running game a little more this year and try to play good defense and, not necessarily outscore teams and let Rodgers throw the ball 40 times. So I think with the limited passing game, his upside is just a little bit capped. And I mean, if you get him at quarterback 14, great. I think he's fine there, but I just don't see a ton of upside, which is weird to say about the 2-time reigning MVP, but I just don't see how he gets into the top 5 fantasy quarterbacks this year.
I don't either. I mean, I think that he has a higher chance of falling into like a streamer as opposed to hitting that top 5. I'm just not very high on him this year. I mean, the biggest concern is he has, I mean, besides Lazard, pretty much all new options at receiver and doesn't show up at OTAs. And I don't know. That's just weird. I mean, Russell Wilson's there in Denver and he's accomplished more than Aaron Rodgers has at this point. Besides MVPs. So I don't really like that. And I could see him falling off. He just has that personality that if he doesn't feel like they're a Super Bowl contender, like I could just see him, throwing in the white flag, white towel, whatever it's called. So I would probably stay away from him. And then if he becomes a streamer and he has a good matchup, he's probably going to be a great plug and play guy. But if you're drafting him to be your quarterback for the entire year, I don't think that's going to be a good play.
Yeah, he's just going to be a little lower volume than normal, probably. So he'll have some low weeks, but he'll have 3 weeks. He'll throw 4 touchdowns. So I mean, it's just going to be a little less consistent this year. Moving on to the running backs for them, I think this is where it gets a little more interesting. Jones, I really like this year. I mean, a lot of studies show if you have, let's say, a lot of vacated targets, a one that goes away, not necessarily. It doesn't always have. We don't always see someone step right into the role, right? Like, so we're not going to see Lazard get a 30% target share like Devontae got last year. I think it's going to be spread out, and 5% of those may go to Jones. And if that's the case, I mean, you could see this guy catching 50, 60, maybe even 70 passes if things break right. And in that case, if you have him in a PPR league, he's going to have such a high floor. I really like him at the 2-3 turn.
Yeah, it's unbelievable that that's where he's at. I mean, I love Aaron Jones this year. I mean, our question here is which value do you like more, him or AJ Dillon? And I think Aaron Jones' value, I mean, at that 2-3 turns unbelievable because I mean, right there. So you drafted first or second. So, I mean, you grab Jonathan Taylor or Christian McCaffrey, something like that. And then your second running back is Aaron Jones. I mean, there's not going to be a week that the person you're playing against doesn't, they just have to hope that both of them don't put up 30 points on you. Right. So that's so I can't even believe whenever I looked it up and he was there, I couldn't believe it. I mean, I think he's going to have a huge year. I mean, he's got to be high on a lot of good drafters board. I'd imagine he's pretty high.
I agree. I like him. I mean, the concern there is Dillon, like you said. I mean, he is emerging. He looks good on the field. I mean, his body type sort of lends him, like, it seems like he's more of a first and second down back where Jones will be sprinkled in the rushing game and then we'll have that third down role. But Dillon can catch the ball too. So, I mean, I think the one thing the one thing that could happen to Jones is Dillon just emerges as, a top 5 running back in the league and really kind of takes over the backfield just because he's that good. But Jones is a good player too, and they gave him a lot of money. So I don't really see that happening. It's a possibility, but at the very least, Dylan will be playable on, weeks, even if Jones is in. And if Jones were to ever get hurt and he does get nicked up occasionally,
Yep.
Dylan would be a top 5 back immediately.
Yep. Absolutely.
He's just a little rich. I mean, 20 RB23, you got to be, that's almost a flat. You have to be playing that guy to get value out of him. So
Yep.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
you like him because of the really, really high upside, but you got to almost hope Jones gets hurt. Otherwise, he's probably not going to cash on RB23.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, it was just where he's getting drafted. I mean, I would rather take my shots on Clyde Edwards-Helaire or even a Cortland Sutton if he happens to fall that far. I would probably put AJ Dillon and Miles Sanders pretty close to each other. That one's probably closer to a coin flip for me, but I would probably lean Miles Sanders just because he's going to probably be the clear RB1. And if you can get that, where they're getting drafted, then that's how you win championships. AJ Dillon could potentially just be an RB2 to a flex spot the whole year, and you could have missed out on a potential RB1 candidate there.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the Dylan, like you said, you're really just hoping for that injury to Jones and that he gets featured. If he's not, he's going to have some dud weeks where, if he gets 15 carries, 70 yards, but he doesn't score, it's not going to get you there in a PPR league. So I think we kind of agree on that backfield. We can move on to the Vikings here, unless you have anything else you want to add about the Packers.
Nope, except for go get Robert Tonyan. Whenever he's at the end of drafts, someone's got to catch touchdowns from Rodgers, and he's probably the best late tight end that you're going to find.
Yeah, and you might be able to get him with your last pick. I mean, he is going tight end 24 in the list that I'm looking at here, so he is basically free. Tonyan is a fine streamer, and if he comes back healthy, I mean, he caught 10 or 11 touchdowns 2 years ago. He could easily do that again with the vacated targets, like we said before.
For sure.
So the Vikings here, I think we both like this team. The roster is good. It has been the past few years. They've been kind of spinning their tires at, 8-8, 9-8 the last couple of years. But no more Mike Zimmer, more of an offensively minded coach here, hoping that kind of unlocks some of this offensive potential that we've seen from them. And, if their defense can move from a below average unit to an above average one, or even an average one, they could be a pretty good team.
Yeah, it's all going to come down to how their defense plays this year. One thing, I think the biggest reason why Mike Zimmer lost his job is the Vikings lost games because of their defense last year, and he's a defensive head coach. So that's a little bit concerning. You would like to see, a defensive head coach be able to elevate average players to be good, and he seemed to make pretty good players look pretty bad last year. So that's kind of tough. Hopefully maybe he was just a negative energy, and just getting him, maybe just addition by subtraction. They get some newer, younger, probably player-friendly coaches in there. I mean, they're coming from the McVay system, so I don't think they're going to be super hard on players. I love their offseason. I mean, I would take them to win the division. I could see the Green Bay Packers having a really bad year and the Vikings competing for the NFC. The only question is, can Kirk Cousins do that? And that's the question every year, and it seems to be no. So, as far as playoff value, I really probably wouldn't have them that high, but they have the pieces on offense to be unbelievable. And we'll kind of highlight that here in the fantasy part of it. I mean, especially with the new offensive system coming in, there isn't a Viking that I don't necessarily dislike. I mean, Dalvin Cook is getting drafted number 9 overall at the RB6. I think he's a really, really, really good running back. I mean, he has the chance to be top 3. I mean, your biggest concern with him is injury, and that we both have it highlighted here. You have to get Madison if you draft Cook. If you're taking him in the first round, you're not just committing to him, you're committing to reaching on Madison to have that potential RB1, because Cook is probably going to miss anywhere from 2 to 6 games, hopefully no more than 2, but you never know. He's always nicked up in one way or another. I think last year he played like the last few weeks with a shoulder cast on or something like that. So he's a tough guy, but he does get nicked up quite a bit.
Yes. Yeah, grabbing Madison's definitely a priority. If you end up scooping up Cook, I would even reach for him in the 9th or 10th round just to make sure you get him, because they really Well, the nice thing about the Vikings is that when Cook's in, he's the guy, and Madison gets 15% of the touches while Cook's tired. But Cook is the featured guy while he's in, and then Madison is the clear second, and then that Madison gets the whole workload when Cook's out. We'll see if the new regime maybe switches that up a little bit. I don't even think that would be a bad thing for Dalvin, though. To be honest, it might keep him healthier longer if it ends up being more of like a 70-30 split. But I mean, if Dalvin Cook's out there running the ball, having a good game, they're not going to stop giving it to him. So I don't really have too many concerns about the coaching aspect of it. I think that the discount on Cook comes from his lack of touchdowns last year and his injuries. But I mean, the potential's there. He'll regress a little bit on the touchdowns, and I think he's going to be good value at number 9 overall. If you get him at the end of the first, that's a great start for
Absolutely.
one.
I would bet right now that he has more fantasy points at the end of the season than Christian McCaffrey does.
That's that's all health, man. It really
is. It is
honestly, but that's not a bad pick. I mean, it's hard to. McCaffrey is just all like if he ends up playing 14 games, he's going to be hard for anyone to beat. But I mean, it's been 2 years since we've seen him stay healthy for any decent amount of time, so McCaffrey's a tough one. There's going to be a few people in your league that have been burned by him that will just have him off the draft board. So I think he might slip into the back end of the first round too for some teams.
Okay, if he falls that far, then I would take him over Dalvin Cook. I have him probably going like 1, 2, not 1. I would imagine Taylor's a consensus 1, but 2 or 3, McCaffrey's right there.
Yeah, as most leagues still go 2, 3. I just think it's just funny to see that like a couple of guys are just not going to take him because he was. So it was just tough last year and the year before because the injuries weren't like season ending off the bat.
And he was the 101 both years. So I mean, you had the first pick for a reason, and that's probably back-to-back years that you had rough fantasy seasons.
Tough there for McCaffrey, but we like Cook as a value for sure at number 9. I mean, he's obviously a great back, and he's probably got a couple more years of being a decent featured guy. He's a little up there in age, but Madison's not going to steal that job from him.
For sure.
JJ, we don't really need to talk about him very much. He's a great player. If you take him 3rd overall, I wouldn't argue with you. I mean, I'd probably rather get him at 5 or 6, but JJ's great. He's going to be amazing.
Yep. He's one of those first round receivers you don't even blink out when he's taken. You just kind of understand that he's that good. So
he's one of the best 3 wide receivers in fantasy for sure, and probably in the NFL. He's an amazing player. Cousins, conversely, is a solid QB2. I think we both like in like a super flex. He's not the type of guy that I would like to draft as my QB2 in a 1 QB league. I kind of like to go a little more high upside with my QB2.
For sure.
But if you're in a 12 team or bigger league and you end up getting him as your starter, you could do a lot worse. I mean, you're probably going to want to pick up a guy to stream when Cousins has tough matchups, but I mean, he's not going to kill your team at any point. He's going to be that guy that gets you 20 points a week. So I think Cousins is a fine option.
Yep. He's 100% a streamer. I mean, he's going to hit the free agent list at some point throughout the season, the waiver wire, I mean, but whenever he has a good matchup, I mean, they're going to, if you're in a fab league, I mean, people are going to pay for him because he has good weeks against bad matchups. Like he does take advantage of them, and he has really good weeks. I mean, you throw into Justin Jefferson, and you got Cook coming out of the backfield as well that can catch some passes. I mean, he's set up. He's always set up. He just always falls into that QB2/streamer category, but if you're in a super flex, he's a great player to have because he's going to get you his points pretty frequently. But if you're looking for like a high upside out of your QB, Cousins probably is just not going to be your guy.
Yeah, it's kind of about philosophy and league size when it comes to Cousins. 10-team leagues, he isn't as attractive because you kind of need a difference maker there. But 12-team teams and 12 league teams and larger, he can be a fine asset at the quarterback position as long as the rest of your roster is pretty fleshed out. Yeah. So we can move on here to Thielen and Irv Smith. Thielen, I like his value this year. I mean, he's at 82nd overall. That's a wide receiver 35 right now. I mean, I think that it would be a really safe bet to say he's going to finish above wide receiver 35. The problem with Thielen is just the upside isn't there. I mean, we all know it. And at this point, Thielen is kind of what he is. He's a red zone threat. He's probably going to end up with 800-900 yards, maybe 1,000 if he's lucky. But the yardage totals aren't going to be there. You're just hoping for double-digit touchdowns once again.
Yep. I mean, my note on him is he's going to win someone a week that he catches 2 to 3 touchdowns because he did it last year. I think he did it twice last year. So, I mean, if you're throwing him in your flex, you're really only looking for that touchdown value. which can be a little bit risky. But if you draft well and your flex position, you're just kind of hoping for touchdowns, then
Yeah.
he's a great guy to have there. If you need a little bit more consistency out of a flex spot, if your draft wasn't the best, then I'd probably stay away from Thielen, just because he'll probably have a few weeks where he's in the single digits point wise.
Yeah, if he's not scoring a touchdown, it's going to be hard for him to produce big weeks consistently. So we'll kind of see how that ends up turning out. But it seems like him and Cousins just have a nice rapport in the red zone. So I don't really
Mm-hmm.
see that ability. I mean, he can lose a step and still just route run efficiently. So I think he'll be just fine. And then Irv Smith, I kind of like a tight end we're going to talk about later, Cole Kmet. And he's going just after Irv. So I probably won't end up with Irv on many of my teams, but I don't really have a problem with him. I mean, he seems like a decent prospect. I mean, if Thielen or Jefferson ends up going down, and he's the 1 or 2 in this offense, then maybe he actually ends up turning into a consistent starter. But I think he kind of falls into the 15 to 20 range where he'll have some weeks where he'll catch a touchdown, and then other weeks where he won't, and he won't be great. But that's kind of the tight end position.
Yeah, I won't end up with Irv Smith because I'm going to be going for Robert Tonyan probably. So I
I
mean,
don't really see them very differently. And Irv, you have to pay a lot higher draft price.
yeah, exactly. I mean, my issue with Irv Smith is like I don't really think like his ceiling isn't going to be a top 5 tight end because touchdowns are going to go like we've been talking about to Thielen. Justin Jefferson's a top 3 receiver in the league. We have 2 solid running backs, one of them probably being a top 5 to 10 running back in the league. So I don't think there's going to be a lot of touchdowns for Irv Smith. And if the tight end spot, that's kind of what you're hoping for, is just any given week you end up with a touchdown. He'll probably end up with a few, and he'll probably have a couple good weeks where he catches maybe 2 of them. But I just don't think it's going to be. He's going to end up on the waiver wire pretty soon. I think. I don't think he's going to be someone's tight end for the full season.
Yeah, I think you're relying on an injury there for one of the top guys for him to really have significant value. The right matchup, like you said, you can plug him in there, but he's on the list with a ton of other guys that are just matchup based. So I don't really like reaching for Irv Smith at his current price. He's currently going at tight end 14, around 11 or 12. So that's just a little bit higher price. And I think you can get Tonyan, like we said, with literally your last pick. So I think you might as well just go that route if you're going to go here. So
for sure.
We can move on to the Lions here. I think we can touch on their team real quick, but we like the way they're going. They're just not quite there with the roster yet. Obviously, the quarterback position isn't figured out, and they're a couple playmakers away, probably on both sides of the ball, from being a real playoff contender. But I think they're headed in the right direction.
They're definitely headed in the right direction. I mean, their over/under being at 6.5 wins tells you a lot about how Vegas feels about this team.
Yeah.
Jared Goff's not a great quarterback. We all know that, but he's serviceable. I mean, he's in that bottom third, but he's probably in the top tier of that bottom third, as bad as that sounds. So, I mean, he's a serviceable starter in the NFL. They're going to win. They're probably going to end up with 6 or 7. That's probably an unbelievably hard bet to make. But I think they're in the right direction. They may have a chance to grab a quarterback next year, and we both agreed when it happened. They fleeced the Vikings by grabbing Williamson with the 12th pick. So, yeah, I like where they're going. It's just let's build off of this offseason with the Lions, because it seems like they always have a good offseason here and there, and it just doesn't turn out as we project. Right. So, on the fantasy side of it, with them, I'm not really looking at very many of their players on my draft board. DeAndre Swift, we both agree that he's kind of just too high. I mean, I was going to make the same note, but I saw you made it. He just made up a lot of points in garbage time last year. And when you have that running back, I mean, your week looks like you've lost for the whole 4 hours that you're watching this game, or you're watching it on the app trying to figure out. And then in the last 15 minutes, you're just like, oh, thank God, he came in and saved my week. But no one wants that. I mean, that's why when you're drafting him where he's getting drafted, I mean, I'd much prefer a safer running back there, or that's whenever I would grab one of those top wide receivers, if there's a, receiver that falls to that spot. So he's probably not going to be there for me, but any thoughts on Swift?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of echo what you said a little bit, but I mean, it does scare me a little bit because I love him as a player. I mean, he looks great on the field. So if I mean, and they have a good offensive line now. I mean, especially with all the additions they've made. I mean, they got Sewell and Decker on the tackles, and the middle is solid. So I mean, they if they end up getting to 8 or 9 wins and they're a little bit more competitive than we think they will be, and he's the featured guy, he could end up. I mean, he has very high potential. He could be a top 2 or 3 guy, especially with all the passes he catches. But I just see this offense having games where it's completely bogged down, and through no fault of his own, he's just going to have nowhere to go. And I mean, like, I just saw that happen to them a lot last year, where they'd have a few games where they're playing competitive, and Swift is involved, and he's getting his catches and his yards. But then there's some games where the Lions offense just can't move the ball, and there's only so much Swift can do. They're going to pack the box on him and make Goff throw the ball over the top. So if he's not having a good day, or the line is just getting shredded, then Swift is just going to have a tough time against better defenses, I think.
Yep. If he was like falling to the end of the second, if he was at that 2-3 turn, I would be happy with that, because then you're taking, Jonathan Taylor with your first pick, and then you could throw DeAndre Swift on there with the second. That would be wonderful. But when you're taking them at the 1-2 turn, I mean, you're looking for an every week contributor. I mean,
he's got to be your RB1 probably.
Exactly. Yep, I agree.
That's a tough thing to rely on from a Lions player. I mean, that's just kind of where I'm at. I mean, the draft price is everything. So 14th overall, a little too high for both of us. We can move on to Amon-Ra. This one we kind of have a little bit of a disagreement on, I guess. I just don't know if I see. He is really high. Right? I was very surprised to see him at 58 overall, which is wide receiver 23. And it's going to kind of depend on Williams' health, I guess. I mean, if Amon-Ra is the clear number one guy alongside Hawkinson in this offense, he could have a solid wide receiver 2 campaign through PPR value. But I just don't know if I see that end of year run that he went on really extrapolating itself out into a full season. I mean, everybody was hurt at the end of the year, and I think he's a solid player, but again, relying on a 1A, 1B guy in a not so good offense is just not something that I really want to do with the 58th overall pick.
That's fair. I mean, if it comes down to it, with the guys that we have listed here, Judy, Allen Robinson, and Sutton, I mean, I would take Sutton over Amon-Ra St. Brown. I would probably take Amon-Ra St. Brown second there. Only reason I would have him over Judy is because I'm super high on Sutton. I think Sutton's just going to be the clear wide receiver 1 in that offense, especially as the season progresses. So I just think Judy's value is going to go down just a little bit. With Amon-Ra St. Brown, I mean, where you're taking him at, you're wide receiver 23. I mean, he's got to be an every week starter for you. With DeAndre Swift, it's kind of that same thing where it's just, how do I feel about depending on him? And I just don't know if I feel that great, but I mean, he was good last year, and he has proven that he's able to do it on an NFL field with Jared Goff throwing him the football. So with that, he doesn't have a new quarterback, unlike the other 3 that we had mentioned. So
right,
I kind of like him. I mean, I imagine he's going to end up getting drafted before I have a chance to get him where I feel comfortable. So I probably won't end up with him, but he's going to have a week or 2 where, he's just not going to show up. So they're not going to have a good week. And
Amon-Ra versus Judy. You want to expand on that one a little bit? I'm interested that you'd like St. Brown over Judy there.
Yeah, like I said, my big thing with why I would have him over him is just I'm that high on Courtland Sutton. Right. I think Courtland Sutton's going to be wide receiver 1, and then you're going to have 2A and 2B with Judy and Tim Patrick in that offense. Mm-hmm. No disrespect to Judy, but he's just kind of been more of a slot guy, and Russell Wilson likes throwing the high arcing deep ball, and Courtland Sutton likes catching it. So I'm really high on Courtland Sutton. I mean, if he gets drafted where he's projected in all of my leagues, he's going to be on every single one of my rosters. So I think he's getting a lot of disrespect to even be kind of in that Amon-Ra St. Brown category. But that's when it comes to Judy, if Amon-Ra gets drafted right before me and I end up with Judy instead of Sutton, or something like that, I'm not going to be upset with it, but I'd probably just take who I would feel like is their wide receiver 1 over the Broncos wide receiver 2 or 3.
Sure. I get you. Yeah, you gotta call your shot with those Broncos guys. We'll go over that when we do the AFC West breakdown eventually as well. Sure. So I'll kind of save a bigger discussion for that episode. But Amon-Ra, you like him a little more than I do, but we're both kind of, back end wide receiver 3, maybe back end wide receiver 2 if things break right. But I just don't
Yep.
know if I see the draft value
He's
where he
going
is
to get
right now.
overdrafted because of how he finished.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
yeah.
That's kind of my problem with it. But
Yep.
we'll see. That one could end up biting me. I mean, he's a good player, like you said. And if Goff can step it up, then Amon-Ra might have a better year than I am anticipating. But I like this next guy, Jameson Williams, who we talked about earlier. But I think at his current draft price, I mean, it's all about his injury. But I mean, if he comes out healthy, he's going to shoot up. So I think that's the thing, is you kind of have to buy the dip with the injury right now and hope that it pans out. And if it doesn't, at 134th overall, wide receiver 55, cut your losses and just take a flyer on somebody else. So I don't really mind taking Williams in the 11th or 12th round right now and hoping. And then if he, comes out in camp and he's on the pup list or something, and he has to miss the first 6 weeks, then you can probably find someone on the waiver wire that has a little bit of upside that you can keep on your bench anyway.
Yep, I love Williams for dynasty leagues, and if you have a keeper league, I wouldn't mind just picking him up in a late round and potentially having my wide receiver 1 in, that late in the draft.
Yeah,
so
should be prioritized in keeper leagues for sure.
Yeah, I think ultimately with Williams, he's probably going to end up being the wide receiver 2 on a below average Lions team, and that just really hasn't proven out a lot in fantasy. So, if you're in just a single, redraft every single year with no keepers, I'm probably staying away unless he falls to where he's projected. I mean, where he's projected is really low. I think he's going to end up going higher than that. There'll probably be some news about when he's going to be able to play by the time we're actually drafting.
Yeah.
But if he's the wide receiver 55, I mean, yeah, you're going to take him in any league that you're in because that's way too far for someone who has his potential.
Yeah.
Redrafts, I would definitely, or not redrafts, keepers, I would definitely reach for him a little bit higher. And he could be, similar to Justin Jefferson, where you end up with your, like I said, wide receiver 1, and you're only giving up a late pick in the next draft. So,
yeah,
I think we both like him. It's just, is it going to be this year, or are the Lions kind of just prepping for a big year next year?
Most drafts will have a lot more clarity when we get a little closer to the season starting on Williams. And I think that's going to affect his draft price big time. So, I mean, he's not going to be here. He's either going to be lower or higher based on the injury news. So we'll just have to see closer to the actual games.
Yep.
We can move on to, I guess, well, let's touch on Hawkinson real quick. I'm not really big on mid-round tight ends. So I just don't like Hawkinson this year. I just don't see I don't see him breaking out. If he didn't break out last year, I don't see him doing it this year. And I think he'll be fine back-end starter, but you're going to have to pay a little bit too high of a price for my liking.
Yep. Nope. Give me Tanyan with my very last pick instead of grabbing Hawkinson in the middle. I
have a feeling you like Robert Tanyan, but that's just
I mean, he's just. I mean, where if you can get a tight end with that high of an upside that late, I mean, that's what you want. Let's go into the Bears. We got 4 minutes until we get kicked off here. So overall, I don't like the direction the Bears are going. I mean, you drafted a top quarterback last year, and then you get him a defensive head coach. Always red flags when you do that. They're a defensive organization. They just, I guess, haven't gotten the memo that it's an offensive league now. So, you have any takes on the Bears? I just think they're going to be pretty bad.
Yeah, I where the new regime picked up, I don't really mind them rebuilding because that's kind of the only option they had at that point with the roster the way it was. So I don't really blame the new regime yet. Like just with the moves they made, I kind of agree with rebuilding. But again, like you said, it's tougher fields. And I just don't really see how this roster competes for any more than 6 or 7 wins in the very best case scenario.
For sure. So love Cole Kmet.
Yeah. Let's move on to the options real quick because I want to get to those best bets before we close out. I want to make sure they make their money.
What do you love about Cole Kmet?
I love his opportunity. So I think Bears are going to be trailing a lot. They're not going to win very many games, which means Fields is going to have to get back there and throw the ball. And Kmet is going to see a lot of targets. He was at 90 plus last year, and that was with Robinson in the fold. Now you got Mooney as the 1, and then Kmet is really the number 2 target in that offense, and he is going at tight end 15 right now. Things I look for in late round tight ends: possibility of being either the first or second target in the offense. You love that because if Kmet pans out as, the jury's still out on him as a player, but if he ends up taking a step forward this year and he gets 120 targets, he's going to smash tight end 15 value.
Absolutely. I'll just go ahead and go into why I love Montgomery. I know you're a
Yeah,
little bit torn on him.
that's all you.
Montgomery is getting so disrespected. I can't even believe it. I mean, the Bears have not been that good the past couple of years, and he's still been a very solid fantasy running back. Tariq Cohen, unfortunately, tore something or did something this
Oh,
offseason. He's out. He's probably not going to play football again. So his backup's Khalil Herbert. Everyone loved Khalil Herbert for those few weeks that Montgomery was out, but as soon as Montgomery came back, he was that guy again.
yeah.
Only concern is with Justin Fields running the offense. There could be a lot of opportunities for Fields to run the ball on design plays and kind of take it out of Montgomery's hands. But where he's getting drafted around Gibson, Elliott, and Jacobs, I don't. I mean, Montgomery has the potential to be a top 10 running back pretty easily, and those other guys need a lot of things to go right for them to get there.
Yeah, I'm going to jump into these bets real quick
Yep,
on Montgomery. I agree with you, like his value, but I think he might have a Swift problem where he'll just have games where the offense isn't moving the ball and he can't get anywhere. But we'll
that's
see with
fair.
Montgomery. I like his value at RB19. Okay, so best bets for the division. Both the Bears boys at plus 4,000 to lead respective Montgomery for the rushing title and Mooney for the receiving title. Star to Mooney because he could literally lead the league in targets with the way that receiving room looks, and plus 4,000 is crazy value there. Vikings to win the division, like you said, plus 275. We really like that. That's
Yep,
they're only competing with the Packers. I mean, that's going to be one of those two teams, and you're getting plus money to bet on a team with a similar roster. I like the Vikings at plus 275, and then
yep,
Williams plus 1,200. You probably have to take that now before the injury news comes out because
for
he will
sure.
shoot up if he's going to come out. But if he comes out in week 1 and he's healthy, plus 1,200, he's got a good shot. There's not a lot of good. I mean, Kenny Pickett's the only quarterback this year, so I think this is the year to attack a position player, wide receiver, running back, because you don't have a lot of rookie quarterbacks starting.
Absolutely. Love David Montgomery. Love Jameson Williams if he plays. Vikings are going to win the division, so that's free money. Peace out, everyone.